somebody. To build $1 million business, you need 3 things. 1, a place to take sales, like Amazon or your own store, Kickstarter, or a combination of all of those. 2, a stacked deck with a small following to whom you can launch products. And 3, a way to expose your products to new audiences. When I started, email marketing was my main way to get eyes on a brand. That still works. Today, however, you have more options. Potential buyers hang out in pockets, so you can target them with ads. They also tend to follow specific influencers. The purpose of advertising is to drop your bait into a hungry pool of fish, giving them the opportunity to bite. You can accomplish this through paid advertising, or you can accomplish this through building relationships. You can either pay to show up in front of your potential buyers, or you can network with the people who control the distribution. Both strategies work, and both require work. For some, connecting directly with influencers, those are minor celebrities who have a few thousand, or sometimes a few million people following them, is a holy grail. They think, if I could just get one of those big celebrities to talk about my product, then millions of people will know about it and I'll be rich. That does happen sometimes, but not like people think. Yes, Onnit had Joe Rogan, and The Honest Company had Jessica Alba. But in those cases, the influencer is an owner in the business, not just a spokesperson. Building a relationship like that can take years. It's not a way to efficiently build a 7-figure business. On the other extreme, there are some businesses that will happily pay social media celebrities to talk about products, but little to no trust is passed on in that exchange, and it rarely has the impact that they expect. In my opinion, paying an influencer to talk about your product is a fast way to lose money and get frustrated in the process. However, there are ways to advertise and create relationships that can drastically improve your sales when they are done correctly. This chapter will show you how to get tons of exposure for your brand without going broke. You'll discover how to find distribution, how to choose advertising platforms, and how to network with influencers. For the purpose of your goals, you won't need to develop a complex marketing strategy or spend a ton of money on advertising. Our singular goal is to cross $1 million in sales in 12 months, and we can be very direct in accomplishing this. The fast lane to get to $1 million is going straight to the people with influence and leveraging the trust that they have with their audience to create your own following. Start in the one spot your audience already hangs out. The best audiences to target are people with the same buying behaviors as the people who will buy your product. I have a podcast, so I maximize my exposure by going to where podcast subscribers are, and that's on other podcasts. To build my audience, I needed to build a network in the podcast pool. One mistake a lot of people make is trying to bring people from one platform to another. You don't need to waste your time trying to convince people to go other places. You just go where they are. At this point, some entrepreneurs ask, what's the best platform to advertise on to increase sales? That's the wrong question. The right question is, who's already buying products like the ones I'm going to launch, and where are they hanging out right now? If you penetrate that platform, you'll have all the buyers you can handle for the next year. Sometimes it's easier to ask, who does my target person follow? Then you can just look up that person, that influencer or that celebrity, and see where they create content. Find that one anchor influencer and his or her halo of influence. Then find similar influencers and platforms to that individual. The most impactful platforms in order of sales impact are podcasts, blog and email lists, YouTube videos, and social media. The key to all of this is getting endorsed traffic. In other words, when someone endorses your product, sales rise. Networking with the leaders of podcasts, blogs, and YouTube channels can get all the early adopters you'll ever need. For example, consider what is commonly referred to as the intellectual dark web. This small group of podcasters and YouTube hosts consists of writer Sam Harris, podcaster Joe Rogan, YouTube host Dave Rubin, and editor Ben Shapiro, among others. When author Jordan Peterson released his book 12 Rules for Life in 2018, it quickly got the attention of the members of this media circle, and they scrambled to feature him on podcasts and interviews. A year later, the book had sold over 3 million copies. Similarly, when Silicon Valley entrepreneur Andrew Yang decided to run in the 2020 US presidential election, few voters had ever heard of him. However, his approach got the attention of Sam Harris, who featured him on his podcast. That put him on the radar of Joe Rogan, who also hosted him. That created a series of opportunities for exposure. A few months later, Yang was pulling ahead of some of the major candidates, and he qualified for the debate stage in July 2019. What does all of this mean for you? It means that if you can cross into the good old boys club that controls the media in your niche, your brand can take off scary fast. The hack for this is to reach out to influencers who have around 10,000 followers. Not a million, not 10 million, but just 10,000 and above. That means that you will be reaching out to mid-tier podcasts, under-the-radar blogs, and modestly sized YouTube channels. They are big enough to impact sales, but small enough to say yes to little ol' you. Over time, you'll work your way into your niche's circuit, and their audience can become your audience. So how do you find them? Start by searching hashtags on Instagram, then subscribe to your niche podcasts, and notice who is regularly getting booked as a guest. Subscribe to relevant YouTube channels, and keep a pulse on the water cooler conversations happening in your space. I also recommend that you use similarweb.com to find blogs and websites that are impactful. You can enter the URL for a big influencer's website, and it will spit out other websites with similar demographics. Make a list of 10 people with around 10,000 to 50,000 followers with whom you can talk about your product. Who are they, and how can you leverage that relationship once you've built it? Remember, you don't need every influencer in the space talking about you. You only need a handful of people talking about you. In this case, a handful can change everything. Hold up, I can hear you saying. I don't want to be appearing on a bunch of podcasts, and I definitely don't want to be on someone's YouTube channel. That's fine. You never need to appear on a YouTube video or do a single interview in your life to create a 7-figure business. But you need to know the people who do. No matter what your business ambitions, you need to know the people who control the media in your space. You open relationships with them by making deposits into their accounts. Make relationship deposits. When you know where your audience hangs out, and you've identified a few key mid-level influencers, the next step is to make connections with those people. I call this step making deposits into your relationship accounts. Too many people try to make withdrawals from bank accounts that they've never made deposits in. Just like a real bank account, that's not how relationships work. Withdrawing from an empty bank account puts you in debt. The same is true with relationships. A relationship must have an equal flow of currency between two accounts, if not a positive balance in your favor. But how do you get there? Well, you have to start by making deposits. You get there by giving. Every day, I get Instagram messages that ask, "Will you mentor me? Will you do this for me? Can you teach me how to get rich?" These used to annoy me so much that I would sarcastically respond, "Dude, I don't even know who you are, so yeah, obviously I'll drop everything and mentor you." Today, I just block them. I've said this before, but you always want to go for the give instead of the ask. If you go for the ask, you're an ask-hole. Don't be an ask-hole. Relationship building takes time. So the sooner that you start making deposits into other people's accounts, the sooner that you will have a positive balance from which to make withdrawals. If you don't yet have a product with positive reviews, then your job is to give without expectation. People will indeed take a look at your brand, And if you can't show a product with a track record, they are unlikely to take you seriously. It doesn't mean that you can't start making deposits. It just means that they won't talk about you until you have generated your momentum. Only then will they willingly share it with their followers. You can start by giving them an obvious, easy way to say yes. The smaller the yes, the easier to get, and you start the relationship there. Get the smallest yes possible. How do you get the attention of someone you have never met, who has no reason to pay attention to you? After all, you can't make a deposit in that relationship account if you don't know the routing number. To quote a good friend of mine, The Godfather, you do it by making them an offer that they can't refuse. You go for the smallest yes possible. If you can get them to say yes to anything, you open up a conversation, which opens up more opportunities to put deposits in the bank account. What's the easiest way to get someone to say yes? Answer: give them money. The easiest way to meet new people is to do business with them. And the easiest way to do business with people is to become a customer. In fact, that's my favorite way to open up a conversation. Hey, I'd like to give you money. There aren't many statements that grab attention better than that one. I go on. I love your podcast and I'd love to advertise on it. Will you please send me a rate sheet? If that person takes advertising, then you have immediately opened up the conversation. Just like that, your foot is in the door with influencers that you want to meet. I have paid speaking fees, donated to charities, offered to do bulk buys of books, sponsored podcasts and events, all because I wanted to build a relationship with someone. It's some of the best money that I've ever spent. If you don't want to pay for advertising, or you don't yet have the profit margins to do it, then find other gives that open doors. I once saw on Twitter that someone I wanted to meet was visiting Austin, Texas, and she was craving some tacos. I offered to hire Postmates to deliver tacos to where she was staying. That's a true story. My friend John Rulin takes a different approach. His company is called Giftology, and they send amazing custom gifts to people that he and his clients want to meet. In fact, that's how he and I met. One day, I opened the mail, and a signed Cleveland Indians bat and ball were in there. There was no note, no return address, just a gift. In fact, I had to hunt down the sender. John has since been to my home, and we have attended Indians games together. He gave without expectation, and now, when he calls, I answer the phone. Give first and watch how fast your network changes. Offer to share an influencer's content or make an introduction. Offer to email their content to your list. The minute you give rather than ask for something, you stand out from the crowd. Most people are ask-holes. Look at that list of 10 influencers you identified and start to position yourself. What can you offer them? Quote them, reference them, comment on their content, or ask them if you can feature them in front of your audience. Find out where they are giving a keynote and how you can buy a VIP spot. What charity are they into that you can sponsor? Get creative and you can easily make a relationship happen. Maybe you want to give your product away to their audience. Hey, I saw that you completed a marathon. I'm sure there are a lot of people who have been following your journey. Could we send 25 samples of my joint supplement to your audience on us? That's another deposit. When they complete that marathon, publicly congratulate them. Make them look good to your people. You don't have to be the Godfather to make an offer that someone can't refuse. An offer is as simple as doing something that is impossible to turn down. Do I have to be best friends with a celebrity? If you build a business around an audience, you most certainly have a competitive advantage. For some, that means building a business around one core influencer or celebrity. In fact, my friend Brian Lee only launches companies when he has an A-list celebrity to partner with. His first billion-dollar venture, LegalZoom, was built around the famous attorney Robert Kardashian. That connection allowed him to get unlimited PR, and the company eventually grew to what it is today. His second big success was ShoeDazzle with Kim Kardashian. The third was The Honest Company with Jessica Alba. His most recent was Art of Sport, built around Kobe Bryant. Brian builds the team, raises the money, and brings on the celebrity. And he creates billion-dollar companies. He is an amazing entrepreneur. However, it is the influence that matters, not the celebrity. For example, an acquaintance of mine paid Jennifer Lopez to act as a spokesperson for a supplement company for which he worked. She's a great choice, but she was just a hired face. She had no buy-in because she wasn't a customer of that company. She didn't use the product. It was just her face all over it. Was she putting it out to her audience? No. The company quickly folded. Genuine enthusiasm for a product, the truthful and organic endorsement to their followers, is what makes influencers more powerful than spokespeople. An influencer actually uses and believes in the product. A spokesperson just slaps their name on the box. An audience can smell a celebrity cashing a check from a mile away. For a celeb's involvement to actually influence an audience, they need to be a customer too. And their endorsement is word-of-mouth advice, not a gig. Just like all forms of advertising, influencers are not a surefire way to gold. They are a surefire way to get exposure. But your product and your brand still need to stand on its own. Even when people manage to find big influencers to enthusiastically talk about their products, if the product isn't right for the audience won't budge. For example, a friend of mine was an investor in exoprotein, which is a protein made out of insects. Crickets are the protein of the future. They sponsored everyone from Tim Ferriss to Dave Asprey to talk about the company. Every time the product was mentioned by a big influencer, sales would spike, but they would inevitably fall again. Unfortunately, the market just wasn't ready for cricket flour, and the company did not last. Even the best marketing in the world won't make people buy a product that they do not want. For the purposes of hitting your first million, networking with a celebrity is an unnecessary waste of money. Your goal is to get a small but raving group of people to discover your product, love it, and share it with the next tier of influencers. You just need to light the spark. You don't need millions of people to know about your product. In fact, that would probably break your operations. You only need 25 sales a day. Go small, and the million is right around the corner. My influencer said yes. Now what? Some influencers are going to politely, or not so politely, say no. Others might not respond at all. But eventually, one or more will say yes, and you will have the opportunity to sponsor them, work with them, or send them product for them to review. Now what? I highly recommend using their exposure to create a communication channel of your own. In other words, bring their followers into your world and treat them well, and they will become buyers over time. So just off script here for a second, a good example of this is just this week I was featured on a pretty prominent podcast, and the podcast host sent me a link to that podcast, and I saw people talking about it on social media. And so these aren't buyers of mine, they're just people who saw me on this podcast. But I'm in there responding to comments, reaching out to those people saying thank you for talking about the podcast, and being active in that person's community. I'm respecting his authority that it's his show, it's his podcast, but I'm active with the followers. And eventually, those people will come over and follow me if they found value in our discussion. That's how you can put deposits in the bank account without seeming like you're asking for something. Just be active in the community, and people will naturally follow you if you're providing value. Even in today's chaotic, noisy world, the highest converting communication channel is still email marketing. If you could only build one sales channel outside of Amazon, I would suggest that you build an email list of customers that you nurture over time. For example, if I sell keto coffee creamer and I sponsor a podcast, I would never write the ad to say, you can find clean keto coffee products on Amazon. That would be a waste of an opportunity. I want the ad to say, clean keto coffee has over 1,000 reviews on Amazon, and you can save 10% when you go to cleanketocoffee.com/10. That way, I can track how many visitors come to my link, and I get their email address before they go over to my store. I do this when I sponsor an Instagram influencer too. Rather than pay the influencer to talk about us and then hope and pray that we get sales, I tell them to send their followers to follow us on Instagram to get a discount. Then we put a discount link in our Instagram bio, or in a swipe up story. Most companies just throw money at influencers and hope that it results in sales, but that's a big mistake. Bring them into your area of control first. When you get in front of an influencer and they're talking about your products, whether that's for free or because you paid them, make a point to make them look good for doing so. Interact with the comments on those posts, thank them publicly, or send them a care package of your products. Over time, some of those relationships will remain transactional, where you keep paying somebody to talk about you, but you keep them at arm's length. Some will become real relationships where you're actively engaged in that person's following and adding value to their life. And some will become super fans of your brand, and they will talk about you incessantly for free. If that influencer posts about you in any way, screenshot that shit. That screenshot can become an ad, it can become content, or you can put it away for a future launch. Continue to kill your influencer with kindness. I once talked about one of my favorite books, Clockwork by Michael Michalowicz, on one of my podcasts, and he immediately sent me a care package with a bunch of his books in it. That's a deposit in my relationship account. In turn, I took a picture of the goodies and posted it on Instagram, which drove more sales for his book. The goal is to consistently have more deposits than withdrawals in your relationship account. Gary Vaynerchuk calls that leverage. Showing kindness and asking for nothing in return builds up goodwill, and people almost always want to repay kindness. The snowball gets bigger. Most people overlook the power of micro-influencers, but they can create a cascade of effects that will completely change your brand. Once you've opened relationships with influencers who have 10,000 or so followers, you can leverage those relationships to an influencer with 25,000 followers. Just 4 relationships with 25,000 level influencers puts you in front of an audience of 100,000 people. That's when floodgates can open. Send those people free product. Pay them if you need to. Start the snowball rolling any way you can. You may progress from people with 50,000 followers to 100,000 followers or even 1 million followers, but honestly, you don't have to. You can continue to network your way up, but there's more than enough business to be had right in that mid-tier range. This is all you need to start to consistently see sales in the hundreds per day. Each new product will amplify all your existing products too. This is when you start to flirt with having $1 million business. To this day, if I had only one place to advertise, I would spend my time networking with other audiences. An audience may be a person, a blogger, or a YouTube personality, for example, but it might also be a group or an organization too. And paying them to talk about me on their podcasts, YouTube channels, blogs, and social media. It's that effective, and it alone can take your brand past the 7-figure mark and beyond. After this, there's only one thing left to do: scale the brand or sell it. To most people, you've made it. Let's do some quick math. What's 100,000 times 12? That's 1.2 million. When you get to this stage and you're on the step where you level up to $100,000 per month in sales, you're on the cusp of making it in most people's eyes. You're on the cusp of $1 million business. This is the home stretch. It's a long home stretch, but home plate is in sight. Throughout this process, you've seen the steps that build to this moment, $1 million business. You've done the work, and you're about to reap the big win. The next stage is a huge jump up, not just in revenue, but also in your mental state as an entrepreneur. When you start flirting with $100,000 a month in sales, a lot of things change. First of all, you're running $1 million business. Just take that in for a moment. From the outside, everyone is going to think that you're hot shit. You're a millionaire. You have a 7-figure business. You have everything figured out. But if you're like most people, you'll still be hustling, figuring it out, and wondering when things will change. One thing is different though, and this is a big one. Your brand is now big enough to be scaled or sold. You've proven your brand makes money. You've proven it has an audience and buy-in from influencers. You've proven it can grow. Now you can decide if you want to scale this into a multi-million-dollar business or if you want to sell it. A business selling $1 million plus per year can theoretically be sold for a 7-figure payday. Conservatively invested, that money sets you free for life. If you're like most people though, this is just the beginning. When Sheer Strength hit $100,000 a month in sales, it took us by surprise. We've been so focused on our marketing activities and carefully stacking the deck for every product launch that we actually hadn't looked closely at our revenue for a few months. When I did check in on our numbers, I remember a conversation that Matt and I had 4 months earlier when we first launched our products. I remember asking him, "Hey Matt, how would you feel about hitting $100,000 a month?" He thought I was joking, so he answered sarcastically, "No, Ryan, I don't want to make $100,000 a month." He thought I was kidding because at the time, it seemed like such an incredibly distant dream that we couldn't imagine what that would be like. But I insisted, "No, Matt, I'm serious. I want to set the goal of hitting $100,000 per month in sales, and I want to work toward it." He kind of shrugged. "Okay. Honestly, I'd be happy making an extra $2,000 per month." You see, that's what made us great partners. I was the dreamer, he was the pragmatist. In reality, it took us almost exactly 12 months to go from startup to $100,000 a month in sales. 12 months to $1 million. Here was the crazy thing though. When we got there, we didn't feel any different. I think I'd imagined that I'd wake up as a millionaire and start perceiving the world in a new way. Colors would be brighter, food would taste better, people would be nicer, and I'd feel rich. But I didn't. At that point, it was just a number, the next step in our business. I realized then that it had only been a number in the first place. There was nothing magical about getting to $1 million. I'd done it, and I knew that I could do it again over and over. I had a process that worked. One big change: you get paid. One of the most commonly asked questions I'm asked is, when should I start paying myself? After all, I said in the introduction of this book that building $1 million business isn't a side hustle. It requires your commitment, not just of energy, but of time. So when will you start getting rewarded for your efforts? Up until the point when Matt and I reached $100,000 a month, we were rolling every single dollar we made back into the business, reinvesting the profits to grow our inventory faster. You want to do the same. However, there's one big change that happens at $100,000 a month. You can safely start paying yourself an income. My students are often confused when I clue them in that they won't be getting paid by their business for an entire year. My response is simple. While the business is growing, the profits aren't your money. They're the business's money. If you pay yourself too soon, growth stalls. If you're taking money off the table, you won't have the money to build your snowball. It's that simple. When you're building out to the $1 million, the cash is worth so much more in the business than it is in your pocket. So leave it in the business. At the $100,000 a month mark though, you can start to take some of that money off the table and put it into your pocket. When we reached that point with Sheer Strength, I wanted Matt to quit his day job and work on the business with me full time. He was worried about giving up his paycheck. "How much are you making now?" I asked him. The answer was $68,000 a year. "Great," I said. "Do you want to double that?" That's how we decided how much to pay ourselves. I wish I could tell you that it was more scientific or more well thought out, but it wasn't. We replaced his income so that we could both be full-time in the business. Pay yourself the amount that you need to go all in. Revenue roller coaster. If you are like most entrepreneurs, then you will encounter this scenario. 1 month, your business makes $200,000 in revenue. You're elated. But hang on, the following month, it only makes 1/3 of that. This happens all the time. And if it happens to you, don't be alarmed. The question becomes, are you still running $1 million business? Here's a rule of thumb. If you sustain an average of $100,000 a month in sales for 3 months, you're $1 million business. End of debate. While swings in revenue are common, it's much more common for people who carefully follow the process in this book step by step to not experience wild swings. For most people, you'll see sustained, steady growth as a result of your efforts. And those are efforts like stacking the deck and making solid relationships that scale over the long term. If you have your system set up for stacking the deck and releasing new products, and if you take the time to build the audience through influencer relationships, then the growth of your business will sustain itself. In fact, you get to determine when you have swings because you control the audience. Need a surge in revenue? Do a promotion. Need to boost slow sales? Call on one of your influencers. Product reviews are going down? Ask your audience for support. The biggest swings that happen are actually good ones. Things like Black Friday, oh, what a glorious day. There's also Christmas rushes. You have spikes in attention due to well-placed podcast interviews, blogs, and influencer engagement. And Amazon Prime Day will take on a whole new meaning for you. Here's an example of a good swing that can happen within your brand. Recently, I was on vacation in San Diego, and I was taking my dad through a tour of the West Coast, something I've always wanted to do. I was in his hotel room one morning, waiting for him to finish puttering around in the bathroom, and I flipped on the television. The Today Show popped up. The show featured a panel of supplement experts talking about different protein powders, and one of the panelists casually dropped the name of one of the brand of which they were a huge fan. It was a brand that belonged to a good friend of mine. I dug out my phone and I shot him an email on the spot. Dude, I'm watching the Today Show and they just mentioned you. 5 minutes later, he responded, whoa, that explains the sales I'm seeing right now. Awesome. That kind of spike is completely random and it might never happen to you. To this day, my friend has no idea how that panelist found his brand. It's not out of the realm of possibility that this could happen to your brand. There are people whose entire job is just to sit on Google and Amazon and track rankings, note trends, and make recommendations. If you stack your deck well enough and you get enough people talking about your brand, they'll do all the work to get you in the conversation. Operating this process well is the same as building a niche skill. You have to practice on your first 2 products to get it just right. But once you do, products 3, 4, and 5 will be where your brand really takes off, not just in recognition, but in revenue. From there, you have all the tools and knowledge you need to scale infinitely. Using the steps you've learned, you can build a world-class brand over and over. And if you build it right, other companies will come knocking on your door, ready to write you a check. Entrepreneur Spotlight, Jeremiah Klingman. Jeremiah Klingman more or less stumbled into starting his first company called Tribe Fitness. After all, when you're just 18 years old, you don't usually have your eyes set on building a company you can sell. He was selling on Amazon doing retail arbitrage to generate cash, as any young hustler would. He knew very little about making his own product, and he registered the name Tribe Fitness on Amazon on a whim. He experimented by listing his first product, a cell phone armband, and he white labeled it from China. His first order totaled just 400 units. Before long, he realized how important high-quality reviews to a brand's success were. He learned that the brands who were winning had the best reviews, so he solicited feedback and gave his customers whatever they said they wanted. Inventory arrived from China in small batches, and each batch was tweaked and further adjusted. The bands were too big for people with small arms, while still being too tight for people with large arms. There was a lot of trial and error. He would adjust a batch one way, get feedback, and then adjust a batch another way. They kept finessing the strap system with a bunch of tweaks until finally it could be looped around one side of the armband if a customer wanted it looser, or around both sides if a customer wanted it tighter. At that point, the armband had stopped looking like every other armband. It had become a unique product in the marketplace. As a result, Tribe Fitness got to the magical 25 sales a day mark in just 3 months. However, Jeremiah knew that the top sellers in the market were doing thousands of units per day. So with that amount of upside, he wondered if he could take this to the $1 million level. The company went all in on the armbands and waited about 6 or 7 months before launching its second product. Jeremiah and his partner kept tweaking the armband for about a year, working to get the best possible reviews and doing split testing of various product versions. The more reviews they got, the better the sales. Tribe Fitness managed to get reviews from 4% of its customers, which was about double the rate of its competitors. Before long, they were surging to the top of Amazon search results, and they quickly surpassed $1 million run rate. Then, at just 19 years of age, Jeremiah was passing established businesses with millions of dollars in funding. How? A commitment to product and customer experience. He went small, which helped him beat the big guys. What's most important in a physical products business these days, Jeremiah says, is building an audience. He said, quote, "This wasn't as important 4 or 5 years ago. Back then, you could start a business, get by, and even get to $1 million in revenue before you built an audience. It's extremely hard to do that now. You need to build an engaged customer base and collect their data consistently," end quote. Jeremiah has learned that to build an audience, you need to maintain focus on your core business above all. Concentrate on whatever is pushing the needle and moving the business forward, constantly keeping your pedal to the metal. 4 years after starting Tribe Fitness, Jeremiah decided to cash in his chips and sell the company. He talked with brokers, negotiated on rates, and filled out countless questionnaires, financial records, and other paperwork. Jeremiah had calls with prospective buyers every few days for about 6 months, which became a job itself. One of my friends who had been through the process, he said that selling a business is like doing your taxes every day for a year. He definitely knew what he was talking about. After a few false starts and a few deals that didn't pan out, Jeremiah eventually got the payday he was looking for. A multi-million-dollar check arrived on his doorstep when he was just 21 years old. That earned him the nickname of the richest kid in Maine, as I referred to him on my podcast. As long as he invests it well, he will never have to work a day in his life. However, now he has his eyes set on something bigger, his next business. Chapter 11. Putting it all together. The process is simple. It's not easy, but it's simple. The beauty is in the simplicity, and that is partially why so many entrepreneurs have used it to become successful. When you strip out all of the noise of entrepreneurship, success comes down to creating a great product for a very specific customer, giving them the opportunity to purchase, treating them well, and using basic marketing to amplify what's working. Then you repeat the process until you are pacing $1 million in sales. The hardest part is overcoming the mental noise in your head that wants to overanalyze every decision. When I speak with entrepreneurs who have used this process to build $1 million business, they tell me that what helped them the most was having a proven and straightforward path to hit their goals. This book has provided that, but your brain will inevitably want to overcomplicate things. That's why so much of my work with entrepreneurs is encouraging them not to do anything that falls outside of this process. When you feel lost in the sauce, or when you hit a roadblock, this step-by-step process will clarify the path forward. Stage 1, the grind, months 1 to 3. Your job within your first few months in business is to take a sale. Nothing happens until something is sold, and your job is to get to that point as fast as possible. You don't have to understand everything or prepare for every possible challenge, and you don't need to have a pretty website. Your packaging doesn't need to be perfect, and you don't need to listen to every person's opinion. Your job in the first stage is to make imperfect decisions as fast as possible. If you're already a millionaire and you're waiting for your next opportunity, you can ignore this advice. But if you desire freedom, crave success, and dream of entrepreneurship, you need to make decisions and move forward. It does not matter if your decisions are wrong. You can fix bad decisions later with new decisions. You might choose the wrong product. You might enter a niche that is too competitive. You might not price your product perfectly, but you don't know that right now. And no amount of information is going to get you to the point where you do know that. Just make decisions and move forward. Progress is way better than perfection. Researching is not making decisions. Networking is not making decisions. Journaling is not making decisions. Decisions mean that you are moving forward. and you are choosing what to bring forward. You can always go back and make different decisions, but you have to choose something to create progress. Here's how to get out of the grind as quickly as possible. 1. Define your core customer. Starting with the ideal person makes all other decisions easier. Theoretically, you could skip this step and put all of your focus into developing a great product, but you run the risk of developing what we call the golden turd, a great product that you keep polishing and polishing without ever knowing who would want to buy it. If you know who your core customer is, then it is nearly impossible to end up with a turd. As you outline your core customer, note how they identify themselves. What groups do they belong to? It's okay and recommended if this forces you to cut off a good portion of your market. If you are selling gloves that appeal to both woodworkers and gardeners, pick one group and target them. Your core customers will take your message to the rest of the world. You cannot create a product for everyone. You can only create a product for someone. Therefore, you have to decide who that is, even if your product could appeal to more than just one customer. Make a product that your core customer loves and let them take it to the rest of the world. 2. Outline 3 to 5 products that your core customer buys. When your ideal person is starting their journey, what do they buy? If you cannot name at least 3 products, you either need to ask them or you need to choose a new market. You will need multiple products to hit the million, so do not move forward if a market does not purchase several different items. I know several people who made a short-term killing selling fidget spinners and eclipse glasses. Yes, that's a thing. But they were out of business as soon as the fad folded. They were sent scrambling to find the next product. You cannot scale or sell that type of business, so don't move forward without identifying the first 3 to 5 products that your core customer buys. Otherwise, you will stay stuck as a perpetual hustler, not a real entrepreneur. It's important to note that you do not need to release all of these products, nor do you need to commit to each one of them. You simply need to be absolutely clear that this core customer makes multiple purchases for multiple things. You have to know that you can get customers over the long term and that your product is not a one-time purchase. To do that, you will need multiple products. 3. Choose your first product. Out of the list of possible products that you outlined, one of them may stand out as an obvious gateway product, the purchase that leads to other purchases. If one does not stand out, then choose the one that interests you the most. Alternatively, you may identify an obvious way that one of the products could be improved on. Is there something that your core customer doesn't like about the options for them? If so, pay attention. That's a sign you're onto something great. 4. Pick a place to document your journey. Sharing your progress will build an audience of potential buyers, and it opens up opportunities through the network that you build. That random person who is fascinated with your brand knows an influencer, a blog, or a retailer that can radically change your journey. Document your journey where your audience already hangs out, if possible. Otherwise, do it where you will be consistent. If your audience follows certain Instagram influencers, then start an Instagram for your audience and document the journey there. Reshare the content on your personal pages and engage with every comment, like, message, or share. 5. Order prototypes and place your first order. Get samples from several different suppliers and choose the product you like best. You may decide to get feedback from your audience when deciding which supplier to use. If all else is equal, choose the supplier with the best communication. In fact, I will pay a premium for proactive communication from my supplier. When you have a product you're happy with, order as much inventory as you're comfortable ordering. Your biggest challenge isn't likely to be sales. Instead, it will be keeping enough inventory. For that reason, more inventory is better in most cases. If, however, you are using crowdfunding to build an audience or to fund the business, you can get by with a very small amount of inventory and order the rest later. 6. Stack the deck. While your inventory is being made, you can put yourself in the best position to hit the million by building a small but passionate audience. When you have a few hundred people who are actively watching your journey, then you have enough to move the needle. You may decide to run ads to get those first few hundred fans. Even $10 per day can get you there. Line up at least 10 personal contacts, friends and coworkers are fine, who represent your ideal customer and ask them to join your cause, which would include engaging with your posts and talking about your product on launch day. Give them free product and take photos of them holding it. Those photos make for great content, but they are great ad images as well. If possible, make a relationship with at least one audience with 10,000 followers. Remember that an audience may be a person, a group, or an organization. Any place where at least 10,000 of your core customers hang out has the potential to put you on the map. 7. Take an order. Take a sale as fast as possible. It is rarely, if ever, a good idea to delay your get money date. Many entrepreneurs delay their launch in favor of doing more content or preparing for every possible challenge. Don't do that. Take a sale and figure the rest out later. When you have successfully taken a sale, you can move on to the next stage. Stage 2, the growth. Once you have taken an order, your singular focus is to get your products to a consistent 25 sales a day. In some cases, this happens within a few weeks of launch. Other times, it takes the full 4 months. Either way, you must hit 25 sales per day before you move on. Otherwise, you have not created the foundation that will take you to the million. Getting there requires you to be active within your audience and to get high-quality reviews. Spend this time to go above and beyond to make your customers happy so that they voluntarily talk about you, share your work, and give you feedback in the form of reviews and follow-up sales. Continue to respond to every comment, share every photo, and post pictures of your best reviews on social media. Here are a few things to consider during the growth. 1. Does your audience actually want your product? If your sales are stuck, you need to go backward. Have you asked your audience for real feedback? What do customers think about the product? If they love it, but sales are slow, you might just need more time. If the feedback is less than stellar, it may be time to take a step back and rethink your product line. 2. Think small. You don't get to 25 sales a day by building complex systems. You get there by doing the small things for long enough. Get one review today. Make one customer very happy today. Post every single piece of positive feedback on social media. Make connections with small influencers. Those little pieces of progress stack on top of one another. 3. Cultivate a core group of buyers. Consider developing a VIP list, a private social media community like a Facebook group or a Slack group, or a first buyers list. Quest Nutrition, for example, uses Team Quest to test new products and be first in line for new product launches. 4. Utilize pay-per-click advertising and video ads. Advertising on Amazon is a no-brainer if you're collecting your sales there. You may have to take a loss on the customer acquisition cost, but it's a no-brainer to get the snowball building. Consider making videos, even selfie videos are fine, and putting them on social media. If one of them really connects with your audience, consider running it as an ad to boost sales. The growth stage is where you earn your scars as an entrepreneur. You learn how to deal with customers' feedback, and you learn how to get comfortable taking sales. If you quit during this stage, you haven't earned the right to be successful. Focus on serving your customers, and this stage will fly by. Stage 3, the gold. Your job in the third stage is to launch as many products as you can comfortably handle without deviating from your central focus. This stage is when the snowball effect happens. The success and engagement that comes from the launch of additional products will create repeat buyers and additional advertising opportunities. The process to release these products is the same as launching products 1 and 2, but when you launch products 3, 4, and 5, the snowball effect doesn't just increase, it accelerates. The engagement with your brand begins to take on what feels like a life of its own. Your repeat customers begin to compound, and the mentions your brand gets across social media increase. Each product release will get a little easier and a little faster. Some of your products may only be singles or doubles, but a few of them will be home runs. It could be that the big takeoff doesn't happen until you've already released a few products. While you are in the gold, consider the following. 1. Only launch products that are multipliers. Additional colors or sizes do not count as new products. Sometimes they are necessary to include, but they will not have the same multiplier effect as a brand new product. Remember that your customer is on a journey, and your job is to make it easier for them to overcome the challenges that they will face along that journey. 2. Advertise via influencers and audiences. If you can only spend money to advertise in one place, give it to influencers and other people's audiences. That's blogs, groups, social media pages, YouTube channels, and podcasts. Only advertise to audiences that are a direct representation of your ideal customer. 3. Make relationships, not transactions. Be intentional to create relationships with influencers and channels instead of just transactions. Sometimes you have to transact to get their attention, but go deeper. Send thank you cards and gifts and make them look cool on your social media channels. 4. Pay yourself. When you are hovering around the $100,000 per month in revenue, you can start considering taking a salary from the business. Pay yourself enough to allow you to work full-time on the business, but continue to reinvest the profits back into the business. The business still needs the money more than you do. 5. Take strategic risks. When you have crossed the $1 million mark, you can start to take some risks. Launch new and innovative products. Experiment with new forms of advertising. Consider debt as a resource to fund your inventory. You have proven that your company has promise. Now is the time to turn up the heat. If you follow this process and you do it in order, you will see progress. No one can promise you that you will hit the million or that everything will always be rosy, but you will absolutely make progress. If nothing else, you have learned the process for creating a product and taking it to the marketplace. From there, your customers decide who wins. If all else fails, you know exactly what to do when the next idea or the next opportunity falls into your lap. In my experience, the idea of a lifetime comes around every 6 months. With this process in hand, you will be ready when it arrives. Chapter 12. The Big Payday. Mark Sisson was in his early 50s when he started blogging on marksdailyapple.com. He had experienced his own set of health challenges and business setbacks, so he might as well share them with the world. Modestly successful, Mark tried several businesses over his career. Now, with grown kids and entering what most would consider their golden years, he decided to focus on doing things that he loved, namely, writing and sharing his knowledge with others. Mark wasn't your average 52-year-old. What other 50-something has six-pack abs and can run circles around kids half his age? As a result, Mark's blogs, books, and podcasts started to catch steam. However, it would be a full decade before Mark would launch his own products. In his early 60s, Mark created Primal Kitchen, which started as a paleo condiment company. There were plenty of health food options, but few condiment companies that were good for you. he decided to do something about that. Mark had already stacked the deck. His blog was visited by tens of thousands of people each month, and he had connections with his previous businesses. Still, Primal Kitchen was a risk. Most people his age would have told him to slow down, keep writing, and enjoy time with his family. Once again, Mark was no ordinary 60-something. He launched salad dressings, barbecue sauces, mayo, ketchup, mustard, and any other condiment that were all designed for the paleo community. They were beautifully targeted specifically to the paleo community, and his audience loved it. Soon, Primal Kitchen products were in retail stores across the country, while also soaring to the top of Amazon.com. Then, less than 4 years from launch, Mark made a connection with an unlikely ally, the executives at Heinz. Some saw Heinz as an enemy, a representative of unhealthy food choices. But Heinz saw the demand for healthy options, and they knew that Mark had carved out his niche. In early 2019, they wrote Mark a check for $200 million. Some accused Mark of selling out, but Mark saw it as an opportunity to infiltrate the rest of the world. When consumers start demanding healthy options, and those options start outselling the big boys, even enemy competitors have to pay attention. That's the power of creating a great product for a very specific group of people. The exit is closer than you think. Walking into a meeting earlier today, I felt my phone buzz in my pocket. I pulled it out to see the following text on my screen. Hey Ryan, I've been a follower for a while. I listened to your podcast and went to the last capitalism conference. With your help, I started my company last February, and today I'm about to go to market with it for $10 million. Can I ask you a couple questions before I do? First of all, I have no idea how this person got my phone number. Second of all, I didn't care. That's the kind of message that makes my day. Selling your company, especially for $10 million or more, is life-changing to say the least. Heck, that's generation-changing. I've seen it happen many times, and it never gets old. If you use the method in this book, you might find yourself in a position to one day sell a business if you want to. This is absolutely possible, assuming that your product is good, you've built a good business, and you have put in the step-by-step work that I've taken you through. In fact, you really make your money when you sell. Even after you cross the million in sales, you will still likely be paying yourself a modest salary, investing as many dollars as possible back into the business. You celebrate when you finally cash in your chips. When you've just started a business, and when you're working on getting to 25 sales a day, I understand how overwhelming it can be to think about an exit. Just like building $1 million business seemed impossible at one point, so does selling a company, even after you've hit the million. Whether you decide to sell your company or scale it to the next Onnit, Bulletproof Coffee, RX Bar, Quest Nutrition, Honest Company, or Procter & Gamble, you need to understand how big of an advantage you have. If you follow the process in this book, you absolutely have an edge over others. Even the big companies that are dominating right now. People who come from big business can only think big. They're thinking about scaling rather than thinking about creating good products for people. They're tempted to focus on the endpoint and think about the macro, like building large departments and scalable revenue engines, rather than thinking about the micro, people, customers, problems, and pain points. If you spend your own time and money directly engaging with your audience, listening to what they have to say, and forming the company's mission and moves with that feedback in mind, then you have the ability to overtake the big guns very quickly. When the world was run by huge businesses with endless funding, they were the only game in town, and their way was the only way. But micro brands, like the ones you're going to build, are the next wave. In this wave, you have to think small first in order to think big. It's not all clear skies and paydays. In my career, I've sold and bought big businesses and small businesses. I've been a part of a lot of acquisitions through my students too. I've seen different ways of how a deal can go down, and I've been involved with businesses post-acquisition as well. Selling your company means handing over a lot of control. And when you are handing over your baby, you want to ensure that it's being adopted into the right home. Few buyers will treat your company or your customers with the same care you did. Few owners will have the grit, energy, and passion that you brought to your business. I sadly know this from experience. I have felt the burning frustration of watching the business that I rehomed get neglected by its new owner. That's frustrating to say the least. Where some of your future wealth is tied up in future payments from the new owners and you're not sure if you're going to see any of that wealth, you can lose a lot of sleep and start to experience regret. Ask me how I know. Actually don't, because I'll start yelling. I have also seen when an acquisition goes extremely well and the new owner takes a $10 million business and turns it into a $50 million business. That, of course, is the dream. To put yourself in a position for that to happen, you have to understand what selling your company really means. If you understand the landscape of possibilities and you know what you're in for, you won't be blindsided if things don't go the way that you wish they had. And you'll be able to course correct to ensure that you're on the right side of your company's history. I've seen companies make obvious mistakes after they buy a business. The biggest mistake was wasting money trying to professionalize the business. When they bring in expensive executives touting old school forms of marketing to professionalize the highly profitable, fast-growing company that you built, that growth can slow to a crawl. I've seen this happen more than once, when new ownership completely ignores the process that I had been using to stack the deck and build my audience, the process you learned in this book. The money that used to go toward building and engaging with the audience went instead to magazine ads and executive salaries. The money that used to go into product development went into paying a crazy salary for an old sales manager with zero hustle. I'm not saying either choice is inherently bad. Depending on the company, that might be what's needed. But it reflects how vulnerable big, established, well-funded companies are to small, nimble companies that are using modern-day marketing. Big companies are not capable of playing the same game as small companies. Doing small things well is usually disruptive to what old established businesses are doing, because they're doing a big thing badly. That disruption is not something to which big companies respond to gracefully. For example, in our third year at Sheer Strength, Matt and I sponsored a major bodybuilding show. When we got there, it turned out that our audience-focused online marketing was working really well. We were the talk of the show. Attendees kept saying, "I see you guys everywhere. You're all over Amazon. You're all over Facebook." They all wanted to network with a company run by two scrawny Midwestern kids who themselves were in awe of all of the huge sponsors at the show. We made these snarky t-shirts that we handed out, and they said, "I bought some supplements on Amazon and now I look like this." They were a huge hit with everyone except the reps from the big companies. Things got a little confrontational. Someone came up to us and said, "It's people like you who are ruining the supplement industry by selling online instead of in retail stores." That was evidence that our approach was working. We were beating the big guys at a game they weren't even equipped to play. Also, because those big companies weren't equipped to play the new game, we had a leg up on how our business was built. The majority of big businesses are totally left in the dust when it comes to targeting a small audience and giving them what they want. They're just not agile enough to be able to do that. Trying to bring a slow-moving big business style of a machine into a fast-moving industry like e-commerce usually involves wasting a lot of money. For example, one of the acquirers that I sold to bought my business as a leverage point for launching a bunch of other brands. They wanted to become the Procter & Gamble of Amazon. They bought my business as a case study of how to scale a business well, so that they could build a huge infrastructure aimed at replicating the style of business I'd built. Initially, I was honored that they saw my company as the example that they wanted to follow. It meant a lot to me, so much so that I stayed involved after the sale to advise them for a full year. On our weekly calls, I'd tell them the exact same thing every time. You're lost in scale and replication. You're thinking too big. You're not implementing any of the things that built this company in the first place. They completely ignored me. They couldn't see it my way because they could only think big. As a result, they lost millions of dollars in investments by trying to scale fast before they had any specificity. I've seen this happen time and time again, and not just with my own companies. I've seen acquisitions from older, rich business people who are literally trying to buy the speed and momentum of internet businesses. They're set up for failure right from the beginning. It's impossible to maintain the momentum of somebody who's thinking small if all you can do is think big. What I learned from this is how effective the strategy in this book works and how vulnerable big companies are. The minute that they lose connection with their customers, the faster they will go out of business. You hold the cards, not them. When should you sell? When you've hit a consistent 100 sales per day, the game changes. The years that follow will be spent growing that from $1 million to $3 million to $5 million per year. When you've crossed that initial $1 million mark, you're in the gold, where you start to invest your profits into other areas of growth. New forms of advertising, new sponsorships, podcast advertising, content creation, scaling the logistics, and more importantly, building teams to run it all. You'll be building the infrastructure to cultivate a real business out of what was formerly just a well-oiled sales machine. It's only a business if you can walk away from it and it can successfully grow without you. If you're doing everything, if you're the integral cog in the machine and everything crashes around you when you step away, then you've got a sales machine, not a business. A business requires a higher level of hiring, systems, and optimizations. That's why my first hire when I hit the $1 million mark was someone who enjoys organizing the chaos so that I can keep thinking about growth. Hiring presents its own set of challenges, and your job at that stage will be to become the leader that your company needs to grow beyond you. That's often the point when you'll say, I think I've grown this business to my greatest capacity as an entrepreneur. It's time to hand my baby over to someone who can grow it into a well-adjusted teenager. At this point, your company stands on the brink of making a lot of mistakes. Avoid the following. 1. Optimizing for vanity metrics. It's very tempting to compare yourself and your business to things like follower count, total number of sales instead of profit, social media metrics, celebrity endorsements, or the size of your team. All these metrics boil down to is making you feel good about how many people like you, and they make you feel good when compared to a competitor, but they mean very little when it comes to the health and growth of your business. It's very tempting to place a high valuation on your business because of the number of fans or celebrity endorsements you can claim. But does that serve your customers? Does this equal real value or company health? I once watched one of my competitors build their entire business on buying Instagram followers and sponsoring hot Instagram models and bodybuilders. They had a crappy product and they covered it up by pursuing short-term attention and authority. They eventually got torched. Vanity metrics make you feel good about yourself in the short term, but they don't create value for anything but your own ego. 2. Forgetting you're in the people business. Remember, this all comes back to people. You're not in the product business. You're in the people business. Launching products 2, 3, 4, and 5, and watching each one do well and snowball your revenue is addicting. But don't let that lead you to simply throwing more and more products out there, chasing that high. It can divert your focus and set the precedent that your company is all about products first and customers second. You also run the risk that your customer will be distracted. As Moise Ali told my attendees at one of our conferences, when native deodorant got huge, there were a lot of people telling us that we should do a toothpaste and a soap, but we were so focused on our one customer that we decided not to rush. We stayed in our lane. 3. Making decisions based on algorithms. I've often seen entrepreneurs fall into the habit of taking their cues from algorithms rather than people. For example, it's common for business owners to look at internal metrics and make product decisions based on what's already hot on Amazon. The temptation there is short-term cash and tapping opportunities to just bring in immediate dollars. That's not brand building. That doesn't factor in the customer at all, and your business will suffer. It's like playing whack-a-mole. Fill this inventory, sell this product, fill this inventory, sell this product. You might get 50 or more sales per day, but it won't compound your existing products and your snowball will never build. Only invest in products and ideas that can have a multiplication effect on your business and avoid the incremental short-term wins. You hold the cards. This is so important. One thing I wish I'd known going into acquisition is that if you've got a cool, popular, profitable business on your hands, you are the hot girl at the party. Everyone wants you. You're the one with the assets. You're the one with the negotiating power. The people wanting to buy your business don't have the power and control. You do. If I had known that, it would have made the negotiation process so much different. I would have entered negotiations with my criteria and my demands front and center. I would have told the interested buyer, here's what I'm looking for. Can you meet these demands? Most people selling their companies go into negotiations with exactly the opposite mindset. What's the fastest route to my paycheck? And whichever buyer produces that check fastest wins. Without realizing it, you're signing your life away for a short-term payout when you should be thinking about long-term goals. A contradiction of the long-term focus that got your business off the ground and scaled in the first place. If I had known ahead of time that I needed to keep my long-term focus, I wouldn't have been blinded by the dollars I was about to receive and instead would have been more protective of my company. If I'd known what I know now going into my first acquisition, I would have been the one vetting the buying company, not the other way around. In multiple cases, after I sold a business and saw what was being done to it, I tried to buy it back. When I got on the phone with the new owners, I actually said to them, the only reason I'm on the phone with you right now is because I gave my dog to a bad home and he's being abused and I need to rescue him. Selling your company is not 100% transactional. It's not like selling a product. It's not a clean break. There will be a lot of emotion and expectation tied up in it. Done wrong, it can cause you so much pain down the road and feel like a missed opportunity, or an opportunity that you had in your hands and squandered. When you sell your business, it's rare that you sell 100% of the business and walk away. Instead, it's more likely that you will sell a majority stake in the business, usually about 60%, and hold on to the remaining portion. You will almost certainly serve as an advisor until the new owners are up to speed. Therefore, you must like the people that you are doing business with, and you must trust that they are capable of growing the business to the level that it can be. That is why so much of my focus is working with entrepreneurs who have crossed 7 figures and help them navigate the next stage of their business. I join them as a minority partner, usually about 20%, and help them grow, get ready for sale, and ensure that the payday that they receive is the payday that they deserve. What's it like on the other side? I have very publicly shared what it feels like to wake up and look at $10 million in the bank account. I have also shared that it did not automatically mean my life was perfect, but you probably saw that coming. In the weeks I was negotiating the close of the sale of my business, I was also going through a separation. In fact, when I came home from getting the check, all the furniture in my apartment was gone. There I was, a multimillionaire, and all I had in my home was a pull-out couch that became a twin bed. I was so broke that all I had was money. That is not to imply that the business had anything to do with my challenges at home, although maybe it did. There's no neat narrative thread to tie this all up. There's no dramatic way to correlate the two. It was simply the case that I had one part of my life that was going great and one part that was in shambles. On my Instagram, it was all celebration and wins. In real life, it was lonely. I used to think about how there were probably people out there comparing their lives unfavorably to mine based on my social media. We all walk around comparing ourselves to the tiny curated slices of life people put up on social media. It's not real. Many people think money will fix all their problems. Nope. It changes nothing but the size of your bank account. People go through incredible financial wins and deep financial losses, but it's not the point of life. It's an accomplishment, but not what life is about. Money gives you the fuel to build a great life. Part of the role of an entrepreneur is to define what that life is, to define how to live life on their own terms. Honestly, and I'm not being judgmental, most of us are pretty bad at that. We're all great at defining exactly how much money we want to make, or what we want our vanity metrics to be, or how we want to stack up against others. We're not very good at defining what our actual experience of life is. Once you've made a lot of money, you can do one of two things. You can shrug and use the opportunity to do it again. I guess I'll just start another business and I'll figure out what this all means later. Or you can do the hard self-discovery work of defining what you want your life to be about. One of the things I wish someone had told me back when I was a dreaming, ambitious 19-year-old was to get very intentional about what I wanted my life to look like once I had all the money I would ever need. Because money is like alcohol. It makes whatever is true come to the surface. If you give an insecure person a lot of money, they don't become more secure. They become more insecure. If you give a giving person a lot of money, they become more giving. I wish that I had been challenged to cultivate a great life before I made a lot of money. Part of my journey after my first business was sold was uncovering what I thought a great life even looked like. I had no clue. I traded a lot of time and energy for money, and I got it. And then I found on the other side that it was just as much, or even more, work to cultivate a truly happy life. Once you do have the money, you'll have the space and the cover you need to go deep and build an intentional life. I didn't do that. I made the mistake of putting it off even further. I started new businesses and initiatives and burned myself out due to my resistance to personal growth. In doing so, I discovered that the things that I was resisting, or the things I overlooked, were actually what brought me happiness. Happiness is found in your relationships, how you spend your time, and the small things that you enjoy. Money expands your menu of options. Some people use those options to deepen their relationships, deepen their enjoyment, and deepen their appreciation of the little things. Others stay blind to them, so they use their money to buy new distractions and expand their own ego metrics. The person who does the former grows old, rich, and happy. The person who does the latter self-destructs. If you choose to take on that personal work while your company is in its growth process, there's a great chance your company will be more profitable, will make you happier, and will support the overall life you want. Don't trade that potential for money. To paraphrase Benjamin Franklin, those who trade freedom for security deserve neither. I'm not quite as judgmental as old Ben, but those words ring true. If you trade happiness for money, you'll end up losing both. By the way, I know this chapter is a little bit esoteric, so I have a podcast that I recorded with Susie Batiz, the founder of Poopery, where she talked about what it looked like to be growing the company while doing the personal discovery work. And she crossed that 7-figure mark and went deep into personal work. And it's one of the reasons why she was able to build a 9-figure company like Poopery. And you can download that case study and all of the case studies that we've gone through in this book over at capitalism.com/best. Conclusion. The adventure never ends. It was December when Matt and I first got sheer strength to the $1 million mark. Almost 6 months to the day from when we took our first sale. I spent that winter, weirdly enough, in a bit of a funk. I mentioned this earlier when I told the story of my dinner with Tim Ferriss. I'd made a huge amount of money, and I'd inarguably smashed my childhood goal of becoming a millionaire, but I wasn't happy. Okay, I made this big achievement, but what do I do now? Am I done? Do I keep going? Do I start another business? There's a weird almost depression that happens when you reach the $1 million mark. It's a whole new type of self-discovery. You wonder if you're really as good as you think you are. You wonder if you deserve it. Most of all, you wonder if it'll all go away at any moment. It sounds crazy, but if there's a big point in the method I outline in this book, it's that it works almost too quickly. Your brain doesn't have a chance to catch up to the new level of success you're in, and it reacts by going into defense mode. You can find yourself sitting at your computer endlessly, watching all the pieces of your business, trying to make sure that no fires start. You've only allowed yourself to think right up to the edge of the $1 million mark. And now that you're past it, you revert to playing whack-a-mole with largely invented emergencies. My whole thought pattern at this time was if I stop moving, it'll all go away. That's exhausting. A part of me was annoyed that I still hadn't made enough money to buy the Cleveland Indians, a lifelong goal of mine since I could walk. When I decided that I was going to put on the Capitalism Conference, my conference for budding entrepreneurs, where I feature the best minds in business, I started out, like any total amateur, Googling speaking bureaus and cold calling to try and land the people I wanted to speak. It took some persistence and figuring out how to sound like I knew what I was doing way more than I actually did. But I managed to book Gary Vaynerchuk, of whom I've been a fan since 2008, way before Ask Gary V or VaynerMedia. The second person I booked was Robert Herjavec from Shark Tank because I'd seen the impact a physical products brand had on the show. The third person I booked was Grant Cardone, and at the time I thought that there was a lot I could learn from him. That ended up not being quite so the case. I've publicly documented my beef with Grant on the podcast, but let's just say that when you meet one of your heroes, sometimes you run the risk of realizing that you don't want to be anything like them. I ran the first CapCon simply as a way to elevate my thinking and my knowledge, and to do the same for my friends and the people who had been following me and who had been learning from my business building strategies that I was sharing on my podcast and my YouTube channel. I did it because after reaching the $1 million mark, I needed to see what the next steps looked like. I figured that I could crowdsource the path by bringing together as many uber successful entrepreneurs as my budget would allow. It was a huge success, enough to immediately plan year 2. But after that conference, I had the same little come down I'd had after my business made it to 7 figures. The same thing happened. I was mildly depressed and unsure of what to do next. Now what? A friend of mine, Todd Herman, called me up after the event and asked how I was feeling. I was honest with him about the funk I was in. "You know why, right?" he asked. "No, why?" "Because you planned up to the goal, but not through the goal." He explained that it's common to get depressed after you hit a goal because you don't know what's next. If you plan through the goal, though, the goal itself is just another step on a longer journey. He was right. After a couple years of CapCon, I started to see deep correlations between the people I brought on stage to talk and my own journey. I started to expand my perspective of what was possible. My lens widened. I started to see myself not just as a successful entrepreneur, but as a mentor. I wanted to help other people achieve their own business dreams by sharing the path through the jungle I'd hacked out with grit, guesswork, and honestly a shitload of stubbornness. And there had been one more very important factor in my success. Through it all, I'd had incredible mentors. We can all point to moments in our life that changed everything. I hope that reading this book becomes one of those moments for you. One of those life-defining moments, for me, happened when I accidentally snuck into a bar to meet Travis Sago, who would later become my longest standing mentor. That ultimately paved the way for my success and ultimately the writing of this book. When you hit your first million, you will have this accidental bar hop to thank. When I was 19, I was, believe it or not, attending ministry school. I was studying to be a pastor. Remember when I told you that starting down this path was opening Pandora's box and you wouldn't recognize yourself at the other end? Case in point. Deep down, I knew that I was attending ministry school out of guilt and that what I really wanted to be was an entrepreneur. I'd never lost that spark that started that day I asked my dad how much $1 million was and decided to become a millionaire. I'd been carefully guarding and kindling that flame all along. Constant little hustles throughout high school, running a scrappy dorm room internet marketing business while preparing for a career in the church. And the vast gulf between what I was planning and what I wanted was starting to wear me down. That's what led me to take a few days off and fly to San Diego to attend a conference for internet entrepreneurs. At the time, I was making a full-time income from my college dorm room, and that's hot shit when you're bragging to your buddies, but I knew that I was just guessing at it. If I was going to be a true entrepreneur, then I needed help building a real business. I needed someone to guide me. I told my mom that I was going to the conference to learn how to grow my business, but I really went for one reason: to hopefully meet Travis. I walked into the bar that evening thinking that it was just a restaurant. A few hours later, when it turned into a dance club, I had no idea what was going on. Life hack: it's not technically sneaking into a bar underage if you go there for dinner and then stay out of sight until they start checking IDs. I was distinctly the youngest person there. I didn't drink at all, and I still don't know how to talk to girls, so I was a bit out of my element. Travis went by Bum Marketer on the internet forum where we met. Don't let that fool you. Even in our digital conversations, I could tell that this was a person who could teach me everything I craved learning. I figured that if I could get Travis to meet me and remember me, then it would be worth it. After all, no one was showing me how to play this game. Entrepreneurship is lonely on its own, but when you grow up without a mentor, spending most of your days alone, trying not to binge the peanut butter because you are depressed about your parents divorcing, you deeply crave the guidance of someone to show you the way. And that night in San Diego, sitting in the dark, watching girls dance on the dance floor and me drinking a tall glass of water, I prayed that fate would find me. Because when someone like me, and like you, has the chance to meet someone who can cut the learning curve, I'll move heaven and earth to meet them. For me, that person was Travis. I believed that he could help illuminate the path for me. This was my chance. I was mid-conversation with a couple of dudes who I knew from the internet business world. Internet marketing was still kind of a niche thing back then. When I saw Travis walk in, I left the conversation mid-sentence to go introduce myself. Nervous as hell, I said, "Hey Travis, I'm Ryan." Travis got a huge smile on his face, and I found myself enveloped in a huge Arkansas country boy hug. "Oh, hey, Ryan!" Apparently, he recognized me from the internet. That felt good. "What are you drinking, Ryan?" I didn't know how to answer. I didn't drink. In fact, I had signed a contract at my college vowing not to drink alcohol or participate in any sexual activity until after I graduated. I was also not allowed to participate in social dancing, probably because it led to drinking. Or maybe I couldn't have sex because it led to dancing. I'm not sure. I still don't quite get the order. Anyway, I think I asked Travis for a Coke or a water while he ordered a scotch. Years later, he would turn me into a scotch drinker. If you ever run into me in person and feel like buying me a drink, I'll take a Glenlivet 15. But only one. I start slurring words after 2. I remember that Travis invited me outside to sit at the patio, and we talked until I literally couldn't keep my eyes open anymore. And I remember walking back to my hotel, wondering if I'd ever see him again. Either way, I was confident that I had accomplished one of my goals. Travis knew who I was, and he would, with hope, remember my name. I knew that finding the right mentor could be a 5 to 10 year process. In fact, as I wrote this part of the book, I was boarding a flight to meet with a mentor that I had been courting for 2 years. I felt like that night at the bar, I might have just cut the line a little bit. I knew that I would be an entrepreneur for life, and I was only in the warm-up process. So a mentor could change everything for me. The next morning, I stumbled from my hotel room to the conference, exhausted,